Hello, and welcome to Arcade Gadfly, a Gadfly City show. Tonight's game celebrates the life, music, and legacy of the King of Pop. It's going to be very competitive. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to Gadfly City on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Throw us 5 stars and fly over and check us out on our website, gadflycity.com. Now let's get to the show. Here are the instructions for tonight's game. Check them out. Let's see what they are. To play, grab a Google Form answer sheet and have it open on one screen with the game on the other. 4 rounds, 5 questions. Submit only one form per round. Must play all the rounds for your score to count. This is the honor system. No looking up answers as we play. All-time points leader on Discord. Subscribe to see that. So, with that being said, let's go to the first round, the first question of the night. Let's start with some background on the legend himself, Michael Jackson bio. Question number 1. What state was Michael Jackson from? For 1 point, what state was Michael Jackson from? You'll have 60 seconds to answer. Michael actually began performing at just 5 years old as part of the Jackson 5 with his brothers. By age 8, he was already the group's leading singer, along with his brother. His first TV appearance was with Ed Sullivan in 1969, at only 11 years old. 34-second warning. If you haven't answered already, you should scribble your answer down. For what state was Michael Jackson from? One of his biggest and earliest breakthroughs was I Want You Back, performed in front of many audiences, and hopefully you have your answer because there's only 10 seconds left in this question. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it for this one. Let's go all the way to the next question. Question number 2, round number 1. Michael got a patent in 1993 for what special kind of apparel? 2 points. Michael got a patent in 1993 for what special kind of apparel? 60 seconds. Get to it. Alrighty, and Michael, of course, had lots of weird apparel choices, right? Like his infamous glove, covered in crystals, sparkling on stage. Very interesting ensemble he'd always bring to every performance. All right, about 30 seconds left. If you don't know what you're doing, better figure it out soon. Michael's only one glove at each show came about because he thought it looked cooler and more unique. Of course, he always looked unique. It became one of his most recognizable fashion statements in pop culture. Only about 10 seconds left for this question. Alrighty, that's it for this one. Question number 3, in the Michael Jackson bio round. In 1985, Michael bought the rights to hundreds of songs to what legendary band? For 3 points, in 1985, Michael bought the rights to hundreds of songs of what legendary band? Get to it, 60 seconds. If you don't know, Michael actually bought thousands and thousands of other people's songs over his life, and for tens of millions of dollars from those people like Presley and the Rolling Stones, Little Richard, Bruce Springsteen, Hank Williams, even some by Bob Dylan himself. Only about 30 seconds left. One weird story about Michael gobbling up the royalties of all this music was that when he found out he bought the tunes to Little Richard's collection, he gave it back for free as an act of respect to the rock and roll pioneer he loved so much. Only about 10 seconds left in this question. If you haven't already, you should get your answer in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. On to question number 4 in the first round. Who was Michael Jackson's biggest influence and idol? With the nickname Godfather of Soul, for 4 points. Who was Michael Jackson's biggest influence and idol? With the nickname Godfather of Soul. Michael drew upon a number of influences over the years, not just from music, but fashion and acting. Like Sammy Davis Jr. and Jackie Wilson, Charlie Chaplin, P.T. Barnum, and even Diana Ross. He looked at like a mother figure. 37-second warning. And Michael looked at Sammy Davis Jr. for his dramatic postures and showmanship, along with the likes of Jackie and Charlie and even Walt Disney. And Michael often said that he loved Walt Disney's work because it combined tragedy with beauty. 5 seconds left in this question. 3, 2, 1, and none. The last question, the first round, about Michael Jackson's bio is: how old was Michael when he tragically died in 2009? For 7 points, how old was Michael Jackson when he died in 2009? When Michael died, roughly 2.5 billion people watched the ceremony at Staples Center. Performances at that event included Mariah Carey, Stevie Wonder, Usher. Eulogies had by Berry Gordy, Brooke Shields, Smokey Robinson, Al Sharpton. About 30 seconds left. Even after that ceremony, Michael received a number of posthumous awards and inductions, including Grammys, Hall of Fame, Music Hall of Fame, Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame, American Music Awards, and many other things. 10 seconds left in the last question of the first round. All right, turn in your answers. Let's take a break for a few minutes while we score what you did. We'll be back in just a couple. Don't go far. And welcome back. Before moving on to the next round, let's go over the answers from the last round. Question number 1 was, what state was Michael Jackson from? That was Indiana. Question number 2 was, Michael got a patent in 93 for what special kind of apparel? Those were shoes. The third question asked, in 1985, Michael bought the rights to hundreds of songs of what legendary band? It was the Beatles. Hope you got that one. The next one was, who was Michael Jackson's biggest influence and idol? Nicknamed the Godfather of Soul, the Godfather himself was James Brown. And the last question in the first round was, how old was Michael when he tragically died in 2009? He was 50 years old. So that's the first round. Let's go on to the second one right now. Second round. What year was the Jackson 5 formed? For 2 points, tell me the year that the Jackson 5 was formed. You got 60 seconds. Get to it. It's interesting because Michael was only 5 when he joined the Jackson 5. He wasn't singing or dancing in the front of the band. He was playing congas in the back. A neighborhood friend actually named the Jackson 5 just a year or two after they started playing. They performed under other names like the Jackson 5 singing group, the Ripples, and the Waves, plus Michael. Can't even imagine why they came up with that name, but you only have 15 seconds left. So I hope you can imagine the answer. 5 left. And that's it. Let's move on to the third question and the ABCs of the Jackson round. How many siblings did Michael have? How many siblings did he have for 3 points? Before the Jackson 5 went to their main record company, they actually played under a more local outfit. They put out a song called Big Boy. So I can't even think about how that would sound with such an interesting name as that. But they got a little fame and attention winning the Apollo Victory, a competition at the Apollo Theater in '67. So that's pretty cool. And it'd be cool if you knew the answer to this question. Only 20 seconds left to write it down. And 10-second warning. Alrighty. No time for that one. We got to go on to the next question in the second round. The Jackson 5 is most famously associated with what record company? For 4 points. The Jackson 5 is most famously associated with what record company? And they were with this company for about 7 years. Led by a man named Berry Gordy. It wasn't long before they actually moved from Detroit to LA to get more attention. But they eventually made it to the big stage of the country, and there's only 30 seconds left. The height of the Jackson Mania, as they called it, was sort of 1970, 71, 72. But they were around for a while before that, and a little bit after. Only about 5 seconds before we go on to the next question. there it is. For the fourth question this round, how many number one hits did the Jackson 5 have? 5 points. How many hits did the Jackson 5 have? Number one in 60 seconds. Of all those hits, they put them across 10 different albums over about a 7-year period. Racked up almost 500 songs, which is a pretty prodigious output, but only put out about a third of them. And 32 singles hit the Billboard 100. Over the course of their relatively short band run, only 30 seconds left. Of all those albums, the third album was the most famous, the most successful, sold about 5 or 6 million copies. Most famously known for I'll Be There, which was at the top for about a month and a half. So 5 seconds left before we go on to the last question of this round. And it is: which song knocked the Beatles' Let It Be off the top of the charts in 1970? For 8 points, which song knocked the Beatles' Let It Be off the top of the charts in 1970? Alrighty. A lot of people try and compare the Jackson 5 to other outfits, and it's kind of a fool's errand to do that with such an iconic and unique individual fronting the band. But the Osmonds kind of are raised in that vein. 30 seconds left. I think the unique nature of their composition and music is why many people consider them the architects of the modern boy band. You know, you have Justin Timberlake from NSYNC and others from Backstreet Boys forming like they did and even sounding like they did. You hear Justin's bringing sexy back notes and a lot of things Michael Jackson did. 5 seconds left, and 3, 2, 1, and none. Well, that brings us to the end of the second round. We'll be back in a couple of minutes after we score up these answers. welcome back. My name is Billy. This is Gadfly City. And let's get to those answers from round number 2. Let's see how well you did. Question number 1 was, what year was the Jackson 5 formed? That was in Indiana. Question number 2 was, how many siblings did Michael have? Of course, that was 9. Question number 3 was, the Jackson 5 is most famously associated with what record company? That record company is the Motown Records. Question number 4 asked, how many number 1 hits did the Jackson 5 had? They had 4. The last question in that round was, which song knocked the Beatles' Let It Be off the top of the charts in 1970? That was ABC. Let's go to round number 3. This round focuses on the solo career of the King of Pop. Time to talk about Michael's legendary solo career. First question in the third round is, Michael's first solo number 1 hit from 1972 was what title track? For 3 points, Michael's first solo number 1 hit from 1972 was what title track? Get at it, 60 seconds. I hope you do better in this round than you did in the last. Some of those I barely knew myself. One of Michael's earliest songs was the title track for a movie sequel about a killer rat, believe it or not. And believe it or not, even more, the song ended up winning a Golden Globe for Best Original Song. I don't know if the rat sang along, but in his solo career, Jackson also teamed up with legendary producer Quincy Jones for Off the Wall, his 1979 album. The two worked together on The Wiz as well. Only about 15 seconds left before we move on to the next one. So I hope you did well on this one, but maybe, I don't know. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go on to the next question. The second one in the third round. What was Michael Jackson's iconic hit Thriller originally titled? For 4 points, what was Michael Jackson's iconic hit Thriller originally titled? Thriller sold over 70 million copies, I think around that number. That means it was certified platinum about 34 times. One's good enough, but 34 is kind of a little over the top. About most of those songs on that album were released as singles. About 30 seconds left. Jackson always said that this song was inspired by his love of horror movies, and if you've seen the trailer, or the music video rather, you'll know what the heck he's talking about. The thing looks like one of the scariest movies you've ever seen. It sounds like one. And Jackson recorded the vocals for this album in the dark to help him focus. Imagine singing without being able to see. All right, no more time for this question. Let's go on to the next. In the solo Michael round. And the third question, how many Grammy Awards did Michael win in 1984 for his Thriller album? For 5 points, how many Grammy Awards did Michael win in 1984 for his Thriller album? 60 seconds. And that year, Michael also won Best Recording for Children for narrating E.T., a storybook, which I've never heard about. I can't imagine the two mixing together, but very creative. He even said he was most proud of that award. 30 seconds left. Story I love most about this album is that when he went to the Grammys, he wore sunglasses. You know, normally when you're wearing sunglasses inside, it's kind of a bad sign. And he promised that he would remove them if he won a bunch of awards, 6, 7, or 8 or something. So it's kind of like a hunger strike, but for for glory. All right, no more time left in this question. Let's go on to the next. Fourth question in the third round about the solo career of Michael Jackson, King of Pop. For 6 points, how many number one singles did Michael have in his career? For 6 points, how many number one singles did Michael have in his career? It's really bizarre to think about that Michael's music is worth $2 to $3 billion. That's more than many NFL football teams. The year of his death, he was the top selling artist, selling over 40 million albums in 1 year. 30 seconds left. Last album he put out was called Invincible in 2001. It was kind of mixed in review and success. A lot of people kind of forgotten, or there's a new generation people that had to be exposed to Michael. And we're heading into the last question of the third round, focusing on the solo career of Michael Jackson. For 9 points, who was Michael's lead guitarist who performed his Bad, Dangerous, and History World Tours, as well as the 1993 Super Bowl halftime show? Who was Michael's lead guitarist who performed his Bad, Dangerous, and History World Tours, as well as the 1993 Super Bowl halftime show? 9 points, 60 seconds. Michael often called this guitarist his right-hand guitarist, kind of mixing a musical and a personal term. About 30 seconds left to answer. Michael, of course, set records not just for album and song sales, but for performances as well, in terms of sellouts, audience totals, runs. About 10 seconds left for this last question, and then there's not a lot of time left. So, you either should be happy or not. 3, 2, 1, and done. That brings us to the end of the third round. We'll be back soon for the fourth and final round. Hello and welcome back to Arcade Gadfly, a Gadfly City show. If you haven't already, follow us at Gadfly City at gadflycity.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Let's get to the answers from the last round. The first question was Michael's first solo number one hit was from 1972, and what was the title track? That was called Ben. Second question was what was Michael Jackson's iconic hit Thriller originally titled? That was Starlight. Third question in the third round was how many Grammy Awards did Michael win in 1984 for his Thriller album? He got 8. He got 8. And he could take his sunglasses off. The fourth question was how many number one singles did Michael have in his career? He had 13 singles. Matter of fact, the last question asked who was Michael's lead guitarist on multiple world tours, including the 1993 Super Bowl halftime show. That was Jennifer Batten. Hope you got all of them right. Not thinking I believe that, but let's go to the last round. You got 5 more chances to get a couple more points. This round is about Michael the Icon. So let's get to the first question. Who did Michael perform with in the 1978 film The Wiz? For 4 points, who did Michael perform with in the 1978 film The Wiz? How'd you all do last time? Not so good? Pretty good? Somewhere in between? Michael actually performed in a lot of things besides being on stage singing. He was in the Wizard of Oz remake. He played the Scarecrow. So that's something to think about. I never saw that movie, but it does seem like one of those 1980s bizarro world remake of a classic. I'm sure Tom or David Bowie must have showed up. But he was on screen at a very young age. I think in 1969, he went on the Hollywood Palace. Of course, he was on that famous episode of the Ed Sullivan Show where he really captivated the world. And then years later, he blew out the halftime show in 1993 at the Super Bowl game. Now, 133 million people actually watched it. It set a whole record. All right, no more time left. Let's get to the second question in the fourth round. That is for 5 points. Which famous dance move did Michael debut in 1983? For 5 points, tell me the dance move that Michael debuted in 1983. If you haven't already, check out the trailer to the upcoming Michael biopic film. It looks amazing. The sound of it looks cool. The look of it looks inspiring. It really brings to life a lot of his classics in a modern way. It's interesting because Michael's nephew actually plays Michael in the film. And he had to train extensively with choreographers to master routines like Thriller or Billie Jean for the movie. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he tries to reincarnate his uncle in a movie that is set to probably break a lot of records, which will be very fitting for a show about Michael Jackson. I hope you're breaking some records too of your own. 3, 2, 1. That's it for the second question in the last round. Let's go to the third one. In his 1988 Bad World Tour, Michael performed 7 sold-out shows and drew a total of over 500,000 people at what famous stadium? For 6 points. In his 1988 Bad World Tour, Michael performed 7 sold-out shows and drew a total of over 500,000 people at what famous stadium? That tour was so badass. Went from 87 to 89. Did over 120 concerts, over a dozen countries. Over 4 million people came out to see him. It sounds like something the Pope gets, so it's pretty holy territory. He had about something like, I heard, between 90 and 98 and 99% sellout rate for all of his tickets. Think about it, that was before really the emergence of Ticketmaster and all those other cartels in the ticketing industry. But even beyond the physical world and the digital world, Michael is still the king of pop as well. His accounts and channels on YouTube have generated over 10 billion views and have 36 million monthly listeners on Spotify. So it's pretty amazing to see his following and admiration still carry forward into today. Okay, second to last question of the final round. What historical figure and lover of Cleopatra? Oh, this is not the right question. That's all a joke, folks. Hope you were paying attention. The fourth question in the final round is, whom did Michael Jackson model his iconic dance move after? For 7 points, whom did Michael Jackson model his iconic dance move after? "60 seconds. I feel like over time, people began to show up for Michael's concerts for the dancing, the performance, the gestures, the sounds, the lights, the show, kind of like a circus, as much as the music itself. The music was intertwined in the show, but Michael really took off and went to new heights once he started to come out with his own dance moves, not just songs and licks and riffs, but jumps across the floor. So you got about 15 seconds, folks. Hope you're doing well. We'll find out if you really are. In 10. Okay, that brings us about to it for the final question, the final round. That'll be for 10 points. What type of crystals were individually sewn into Michael's iconic glove, which he only wore on his right hand? What type of crystals were individually sewn into Michael's iconic glove? For 10 points, you got 60 seconds. For all the talk about Michael's gloves, not in the OJ sense, but I'm more of a fan of his hats. Guy had some killer hats, no pun intended, in Billie Jean, which was supposed to be called Chicago Nights, maybe in homage to Chicago's notorious past of gangsters and criminality. But the glove is maybe not my favorite piece of apparel Michael would rock. I'm more of a fan of those shoes that allowed him to glide across the floor like he was an astronaut. Only about 10 seconds left to answer the final question, the final round of Arcade Gadfly. This is a Gadfly City show. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. That does it. We'll go tally up the scores and come back and give you the answers to the final round. Thanks a lot. Welcome back to Arcade Gadfly, the Gadfly City Show. Let's go over the answers to the last round, which was our final round. The first question was, who did Michael perform with in the 1978 film The Wiz? He performed with Diana Ross. Second question asked, what famous dance move did Michael debut in 1983? That was the moonwalk. If you don't remember, the third question asked, during his 1988 rather, world tour, Michael performed 7 sold out shows. At what famous stadium? That was the Wembley Stadium. Fourth question asked, whom did Michael Jackson model his iconic dance moves after? That was the wonderful Fred Astaire. And finally, the final question in the final round asked, what type of crystals were individually sewn into Michael's iconic glove? Those were Swarovski crystals. And I hope you liked your score in this game. I hope it's what you wanted. And this has been another program of Arcade Gadfly, a Gadfly City show. If you haven't already, follow us at Gadfly City at gadflycity.com and on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much and fly back soon.